Chapter 1 of Book 1 of Prior Analytics. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. Chapter 1 of Proposition, Term, Syllogism, and its Elements. It is first requisite to say what is the subject concerning which, and why the present treatise is undertaken, namely, that it is concerning demonstration, and for the sake of demonstrative science, we must afterwards define what is a proposition, what a term, and what a syllogism, also what kind of syllogism is perfect, and what imperfect, lastly, what it is for a thing to be, or not to be, in a certain whole, and what we say it is to be predicated of everything, or of nothing, of a class. A proposition then is a sentence which affirms or denies something of something, and this is universal, or particular, or indefinite. I denominate universal the being present with all or none, particular the being present with something, or not with something, or not with everything, but the indefinite the being present or not being present, without the universal or particular sign, as for example, that there is the same science of contraries, or that pleasure is not good. But a demonstrative proposition differs from a dialectic in this, that the demonstrative is an assumption of one part of the contradiction, for a demonstrator does not interrogate, but assume, but the dialectic is an interrogation of contradiction. As regards, however, forming a syllogism from either proposition, there will be no difference between one and the other, since he who demonstrates, and he who interrogates, syllogize, assuming that something is, or is not present with something. Wherefore a syllogistic proposition will be simply an affirmation or negation of something concerning something, after the above mentioned mode. It is however demonstrative, if it be true, and assumed through hypotheses from the beginning, and the dialectic proposition is to him who inquires an interrogation of contradiction, but to him who syllogizes an assumption of what is seen and probable, as we have shown in the topics. What therefore a proposition is, and wherein the syllogistic demonstrative and dialectic differ, will be shown accurately in the following treatises, but for our present requirements, what has now been determined by us may perhaps suffice. Again, I call that a term into which a proposition is resolved, as for instance, the predicate and that of which it is predicated, whether to be or not to be is added or separated. Lastly, a syllogism is a sentence in which certain things being laid down, something else different from the premises necessarily results, in consequence of their existence. I say that, in consequence of their existence, something results through them, but though something happens through them, there is no need of any external term in order to the existence of the necessary consequence. Wherefore I call a perfect syllogism that which requires nothing else beyond the premises assumed for the necessary consequence to appear, but an imperfect syllogism that which requires besides one or more things which are necessary through the supposed terms, but have not been assumed through propositions. But for one thing to be in the whole of another, and for one thing to be predicated of the whole of another, are the same thing, and we say it is predicated of the whole, when nothing can be assumed of the subject, of which the other may not be asserted, and as regards being predicated of nothing in like manner. Chapter 2 on the conversion of propositions. Since every proposition is either of that which is present simply, or is present necessarily or contingently, and of these some are affirmative, but others negative, according to each appellation. Again, since of affirmative and negative propositions some are universal, others particular, and others indefinite, it is necessary that the universal negative proposition of what is present should be converted in its terms. For instance, if "no pleasure is good," "neither will any good be pleasure," but an affirmative proposition we must of necessity convert not universally but particularly, as if "all pleasure is good," it is also necessary that "a certain good should be pleasure," but of particular propositions we must convert the affirmative proposition particularly, since if "a certain pleasure is good," so also "will a certain good be pleasure." A negative proposition, however, need not be thus converted, since it does not follow if "man" is not present with "a certain animal," that animal also is not present with a certain man. Let then first the proposition A, B be an universal negative, if A is present with no B, neither will B be present with any A, for if it should be present with some A, for example with C, it will not be true that A is present with no B, since C is something of B. If, again, A is present with every B, B will be also present with some A, for if with no A, neither will A be present with any B, but it was supposed to be present with every B. In a similar manner also, if the proposition be particular, for if A be present with some B, B must also necessarily be present with some A, for if it were present with none, neither would A be present with any B. But if A is not present with some B, B need not be present with some A. For example, if B is "animal," but A "man," for man is not present with "every animal," but "animal" is present with "every man." Chapter 3 On the conversion of modal propositions. The same system will hold good in necessary propositions, for an universal negative is universally convertible, but either affirmative proposition particularly, for if it is necessary that A should be present with no B, it is also necessary that B should be present with no A, for if it should happen to be present with any, A also might happen to be present with some B, but if A is of necessity present with every, or with some certain B, B is also necessarily present with some certain A, for if it were not necessarily, neither would A of necessity be present with some certain B. A particular negative, however, is not converted, for the reason we have before assigned. In contingent propositions, since contingency is multifariously predicated, for we call the necessary and the not necessary and the possible contingent, in all affirmatives conversion will occur in a similar manner, for if A is contingent to every or to some certain B, B may also be contingent to some A, for if it were to none, neither would A be to any B, for this has been shown before. The like, however, does not occur in negative propositions, but such things as are called contingent, either from their being necessarily not present, or from their being not necessarily present, are converted similarly with the former, e.g. if a man should say that it is contingent for a man not to be a horse, or for whiteness to be present with no garment, for of these the one is necessarily not present, but the other is not necessarily present, and the proposition is similarly convertible, for if it be contingent to no man to be a horse, it also concurs with no horse to be a man, and if whiteness happens to no garment, a garment also happens to no whiteness, for if it did happen to any, whiteness will also necessarily happen to a certain garment, and this has been shown before, and in like manner with respect to the particular negative proposition. But whatever things are called contingent, as being for the most part, and from their nature, after which manner we define the contingent, will not subsist similarly in negative conversions, for an universal negative proposition is not converted, but a particular one is. This however will be evident when we speak of the contingent. At present, in addition to what we have said, let thus much be manifest, that to happen to nothing, or not to be present with anything, has an affirmative figure, for it is contingent is similarly arranged with it is and it is always and entirely produces affirmation in whatever it is attributed to, e.g. it is not good, or it is not white, or in short, it is not this thing. This will however be shown in what follows, but as regards conversions, these will coincide with the rest. End of chapter 3 of book 1. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 4 of book 1 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle, translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 4 of Syllogism and of the first figure. These things being determined, let us now describe by what, when, and how every syllogism is produced, and let us afterwards speak of demonstration, for we must speak of syllogism prior to demonstration, because syllogism is more universal, since, indeed, demonstration is a certain syllogism, but not every syllogism is demonstration. When, then, three terms so subsist, with reference to each other, as that the last is in the whole of the middle, and the middle either is or is not in the whole of the first, then it is necessary that there should be a perfect syllogism of the extremes. But I call that the middle which is itself in another, whilst another is in it, and which also becomes the middle by position, but the extreme that which is itself in another, and in which another also is. For if A is predicated of every B, and B of every C, A must necessarily be predicated of every C, for it has been before shown how we predicate of every, so also if A is predicated of no B, but B is predicated of every C, A will not be predicated of any C. But if the first is in every middle, but the middle is in no last, there is not a syllogism of the extremes, for nothing necessarily results from the existence of these, since the first happens to be present with every and with no extreme, so that neither a particular nor universal conclusion necessarily results, and nothing necessary resulting, there will not be through these a syllogism. Let the terms of being present universally be animal, man, horse, and let the terms of being present with no one be animal, man, stone. Example 1. Every man is an animal. No horse is a man. Every horse is an animal. Every man is an animal. No stone is a man. No stone is an animal. Since then neither the first term is present with the middle, nor the middle with any extreme, there will not thus be a syllogism. Let the terms of being present be science, line, medicine, but of not being present, science, line, unity. Example 2. No line is science. No medicine is a line. Every medicine is science. No line is science. No unity is a line. No unity is science. The terms then, being universal, it is manifest in this figure, when there will and when there will not be a syllogism. Also, that when there is a syllogism, it is necessary that the terms should subsist, as we have said, and that if they do thus subsist, there will evidently be a syllogism. But if one of the terms be universal, and the other particular, in relation to the other, when the universal is joined to the major extreme, whether affirmative or negative, but the particular to the minor affirmative, there must necessarily be a perfect syllogism. But when the universal is joined to the minor, or the terms are arranged in some other way, a syllogism is impossible. I call the major extreme that in which the middle is, and the minor that which is under the middle. For let A be present with every B, but B with some C, if then to be predicated of every is what has been asserted from the first, A must necessarily be present with some C, and if A is present with no B, but B with some C, A must necessarily not be present with some C. For what we mean by the being predicated of no one has been defined, so that there will be a perfect syllogism. In like manner, if B, C being affirmative, be indefinite, for there will be the same syllogism, both of the indefinite and of that which is assumed as a particular. If indeed to the minor extreme an universal affirmative or negative be added, there will not be a syllogism, whether the indefinite or particular affirms or denies, e.g. if A is or is not present with some B, but B is present to every C, let the terms of affirmation be good, habit, prudence, and those of negation good, habit, ignorance. Example 3. Some habit is not good. All prudence is a habit. All prudence is good. Some habit is not good. All ignorance is a habit. No ignorance is good. Again, if B is present with no C, but A is present or is not present with some B, or not with every B, neither thus will there be a syllogism. Let the terms of being present with every individual be white, horse, swan, but those of being present with no one be white, horse, crow. Example 4. Some horse is not white. No swan is a horse. Every swan is white. Some horse is not white. No crow is a horse. No crow is white. The same also may be taken if A, B, be indefinite. Neither will there be a syllogism when to the major extreme the universal affirmative or negative is added, but to the minor a particular negative, whether it be indefinitely or particularly taken, e.g. if A is present with every B, but B is not present with some, or not with every C. For to what the middle is not present, to this, both to every and to none, the first will be consequent. For let the terms animal, man, white, be supposed. Afterwards, from among those white things of which man is not predicated, let swan and snow be taken. Hence, animal is predicated of every individual of the one, but of no individual of the other, wherefore there will not be a syllogism. Example 5. Every man is an animal. Something white, i.e. a swan, is not a man. Every swan is an animal. Every man is an animal. Something white, i.e. snow, is not a man. No snow is an animal. Again, let A be present with no B, but B not be present with some C. Let the terms also be inanimate, man, white. Then let swan and snow be taken from those white things, of which man is not predicated, for inanimate is predicated of every individual of the one, but of no individual of the other. Example 6. No man is inanimate. Something white, i.e. snow, is not a man. All snow is inanimate. No man is inanimate. Something white, i.e. a swan, is not a man. No swan is inanimate. Once more, since it is indefinite for B not to be present with some C, for it is truly asserted that it is not present with some C, whether it is present with none, or not with every C, such terms being taken so as to be present with none, there will be no syllogism, and this has been declared before. Wherefore it is evident that when the terms are thus, there will not be a syllogism, since if one could be, there could be also one in these, and in like manner it may be shown if even an universal negative be taken. Nor will there by any means be a syllogism if both particular intervals be predicated either as affirmative or negative, or the one affirmative and the other negative, or the one indefinite or the other definite, or both indefinite, but let the common terms of all be animal, white, man, animal, white, stone. Example 7. Something white is is not an animal. Some man is not white. Every man is an animal. Something white is not an animal. Some stone is not white. No stone is an animal. From what has been said, then, it is evident that if there be a particular syllogism in this figure, the terms must necessarily be as we have said, and that if the terms be thus, there will necessarily be a syllogism, but by no means if they are otherwise. It is also clear that all the syllogisms in this figure are perfect, for all are perfected through the first assumptions, and that all problems are demonstrated by this figure, for by this to be present with all, and with none, and with some, and not with some, are proved, and such I call the first figure. Chapter 5. Of the second figure. When the same middle term is present with every individual of the one, but with none of the other, or is present to every or to none of each, a figure of this kind I call the second figure. The middle term also in it, I call that which is predicated of both extremes, and the extremes I denominate those of which this middle is predicated, the greater extreme being that which is placed near the middle, but the less that which is farther from the middle. Now the middle is placed beyond the extremes, and is first in position, wherefore by no means will there be a perfect syllogism in this figure. There may however be one both when the terms are and are not universal. And if they be universal, there will be a syllogism when the middle is present with all and with none, to whichever extreme the negation is added, but by no means in any other way. For let M be predicated of no N, but of every O. Since then a negative proposition is convertible, N will be present with no M, but M was supposed to be present with every O. Wherefore N will be present with no O, for this has been proved before. Again, if M be present with every N, but with no O, neither will O be present with any N. For if M be present with no O, neither will O be present with any M, but M was present with every N. Hence also O will be present with no N. For again the first figure is produced. Since however a negative proposition is converted, neither will N be present with any O. Hence there will be the same syllogism. We may also demonstrate the same things by a deduction to the impossible. It is evident therefore that when the terms are thus, a syllogism, though not a perfect one, is produced, for the necessary is not only perfected from first assumptions, but from other things also. If also M is predicated of every N, and of every O, there will not be a syllogism. Let the terms of being present be "substance," "animal," "man," and of not being present "substance," "animal," "stone." The middle term "substance." Example 1. Every animal is a substance. Every man is a substance. Every man is an animal. Every animal is a substance. Every stone is a substance. No stone is an animal. Nor will there then be a syllogism when M is neither predicated of any N, nor of any O. Let the terms of being present be "line," "animal," "man," but of not being present "line," "animal," "stone." Example 2. No animal is a line. No man is a line. Every man is an animal. No animal is a line. No stone is a line. No stone is an animal. Hence it is evident that if there is a syllogism when the terms are universal, the latter must necessarily be, as we said at the beginning, for if they are otherwise, no necessary conclusion follows. But if the middle be universal, in respect to either extreme, when universal belongs to the major either affirmatively or negatively, but to the minor particularly, and in a manner opposite to the universal, I mean by opposition, if the universal be negative, but the particular affirmative, or if the universal is affirmative, but the particular negative, it is necessary that a particular negative syllogism should result. For if M is present with no N, but with a certain O, N must necessarily not be present with a certain O, for since a negative proposition is convertible, N will be present with no M, but M was by hypothesis present with a certain O, wherefore N will not be present with a certain O, for a syllogism is produced in the first figure. Again, if M is present with every N, but not with a certain O, N must of necessity not be present with a certain O, for if it is present with every O, and M is predicated of every N, M must necessarily be present with every O. But it was supposed not to be present with a certain O, and if M is present with every N, and not with every O, there will be a syllogism that N is not present with every O, and the demonstration will be the same. But if M is predicated of every O, but not of every N, there will not be a syllogism. Let the terms of presence be "animal," "substance," "crow," and of absence "animal," "white," "crow." Example 3. Not every substance is an animal. Every crow is an animal. Every crow is a substance. Not everything white is an animal. Every crow is an animal. No crow is white. neither will there be a syllogism when M is predicated of no O, but of a certain N. Let the terms of presence be animal, substance, stone, but of absence animal, substance, science. Example 4. Some substance is an animal. No stone is an animal. Every stone is substance. Some substance is an animal. No science is an animal. No science is substance. When therefore universal is opposed to particular, we have declared when there will, and when there will not, be a syllogism. But when the propositions are of the same quality, as both being negative or affirmative, there will not by any means be a syllogism. For first, let them be negative, and let the universal belong to the major extreme, as let M be present with no N, and not be present with a certain O. It may happen therefore that N shall be present with every, and with no O. Let the terms of universal absence be black, snow, animal. Example 5. No snow is black. Some animal is not black. No animal is snow. But we cannot take the terms of universal presence if M is present with a certain O, and with a certain O not present. For if N is present with every O, but M with no N, M will be present with no O. But by hypothesis it was present with some O, wherefore it is not possible thus to assume the terms. We may prove it nevertheless from the indefinite. For since M was truly asserted not to be with some certain O, even if it is present with no O, yet being present with no O, there was not a syllogism. It is evident that neither now will there be one. Again, let them be affirmative, and let the universal be similarly assumed, e.g. let M be present with every N, and with a certain O. N may happen therefore to be present, both with every, and with no O. Let the terms of being present with none be white, swan, stone. Example 6. Every swan is white. Some stone is white. No stone is a swan. But we cannot assume the terms of being present with every, for the reason which we have before stated, but it may be shown from the indefinite. Example 7. Every swan is white. Some bird is not white. Every bird is a swan. Every swan is white. Every bird is a swan. Every bird is white. But if the universal be joined to the minor extreme, and M is present with no O, and is not present with some certain N, it is possible for N to be present with every, and with no O. Let the terms of presence be white, animal, crow, but of absence white, stone, crow. Example 8. Some animal is not white. No crow is white. Every crow is an animal. Some stone is not white. No crow is white. No crow is a stone. But if the propositions are affirmative, let the terms of absence be "white," "animal," "snow," of presence "white," "animal," "swan." Example 9. Some animal is white, all snow is white, no snow is an animal. Some animal is white, every swan is white, every swan is an animal. Therefore it is evident, when the propositions are of the same quality, and the one universal, but the other particular, that there is by no means a syllogism. Neither however will there be one, if a thing be present to some one of each term, or not present, or to the one, but not to the other, or to neither universally, or indefinitely. Let the common terms of all be "white," "animal," "man," "white," "animal," "inanimate." Example 10. Some animal is (is not) white. Some man is (is not) white. Every man is an animal. Some animal is (is not) white. Something inanimate is (is not) white. Nothing inanimate is an animal. Wherefore it is evident from what we have stated, that if the terms subsist towards each other, as has been said, there is necessarily a syllogism, and if there be a syllogism, the terms must thus subsist. It is also clear that all syllogisms in this figure are imperfect, for all of them are produced from certain assumptions, which are either of necessity in the terms, or are admitted as hypotheses, as when we demonstrate by the impossible. Lastly, it appears that an affirmative syllogism is not produced in this figure, but all are negative, both the universal and also the particular. End of chapter 5 of book 1. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards. Chapter 6 of book 1 of Prior Analytics by Aristotle. Translated by Octavius Owen. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Jeffrey Edwards. Chapter 6 of Syllogisms in the third figure. When with the same thing one is present with every, but the other with no individual, or both with every, or with none, such I call the third figure, and the middle in it I call that of which we predicate both, but the predicates the extremes, the greater extreme being the one more remote from the middle, and the less that which is nearer to the middle. But the middle is placed beyond the extremes, and is last in position. Now neither will there be a perfect syllogism, even in this figure, but there may be one, when the terms are joined to the middle, both universally and not universally. Now when the terms are universally so, when, for instance, P and R are present with every S, there will be a syllogism, so that P will necessarily be present with some certain R. For since an affirmative is convertible, S will be present to a certain R. Wherefore, since P is present to every S, but S to some certain R, P must necessarily be present with some R, for a syllogism arises in the first figure. We may also make the demonstration through the impossible, and by exposition. For if both are present with every s, if some s is assumed, e.g. n, both P and R will be present with this. Wherefore P will be present with a certain R, and if R is present with every s, but P is present with no s, there will be a syllogism, so that P will be necessarily inferred as not present with a certain R. For the same mode of demonstration will take place, the proposition R, S being converted. This may also be demonstrated by the impossible, as in the former syllogisms. But if R is present with no s, but P with every s, there will not be a syllogism. Let the terms of presence be animal, horse, man, but of absence, animal, inanimate, man. Example 1. Every man is an animal. No man is a horse. Every horse is an animal. Every man is an animal. No man is inanimate. Nothing inanimate is a horse. Neither when both are predicated of no s will there be a syllogism. Let the terms of presence be animal, horse, inanimate, but of absence, man, horse, inanimate, the middle, inanimate. Example 2. Nothing inanimate is an animal. Nothing inanimate is a horse. Every horse is an animal. Nothing inanimate is a man. Nothing inanimate is a horse. No horse is a man. Wherefore also in this figure it is evident when there will, and when there will not be a syllogism, the terms being universal, for when both terms are affirmative, there will be a syllogism in which it will be concluded that extreme is with a certain extreme, but when both terms are negative, there will not be. When however one is negative and the other affirmative, and the major is negative, but the other affirmative, there will be a syllogism, that the extreme is not present with a certain extreme, but if the contrary, there will not be. If indeed one be universal in respect to the middle, and the other particular, both being affirmative, syllogism is necessarily produced, whichever term be universal. For if R is present with every s, but P with a certain s, P must necessarily be present with a certain R. For since the affirmative is convertible, S will be present with a certain P, so that since R is present to every S, and S with a certain P, R will also be present with a certain P, wherefore also P will be present with a certain R. Again, if R is present with a certain S, but P is present with every S, P must necessarily be present with a certain R, for the mode of demonstration is the same, and these things may be demonstrated like the former, both by the impossible and by exposition. If however one be affirmative and the other negative, and the affirmative be universal, when the minor is affirmative there will be a syllogism, for if R is present with every S, and P not present with a certain S, P must also necessarily not be present with a certain R, since if P is present with every R, and R with every S, P will also be present with every S, but it is not present, and this may also be shown without deduction, if some S be taken with which P is not present. But when the major is affirmative, there will not be a syllogism, e.g. if P is present with every S, but R is not present with a certain S, let the terms of being universally present with be animate, man, animal. Example 3. Every animal is animate. Some animal is not a man. Every man is animate. But it is not possible to take the terms of universal negative, if R is present with a certain S, and with a certain S is not present, since if P is present with every S, and R with a certain S, P will also be present with a certain R, but it was supposed to be present with no R, therefore we must assume the same as in the former syllogisms. As to declare something not present with a certain thing is indefinite, so that also which is not present with any individual, it is true to say, is not present with a certain individual, but not being present with any, there was no syllogism, therefore it is evident there will be no syllogism. But if the negative term be universal, yet the particular affirmative, when the major is negative, but the minor affirmative, there will be a syllogism. For if P is present with no S, but R is present with a certain S, P will not be present with a certain R. And again there will be the first figure, the proposition R, S being converted, but when the minor is negative, there will not be a syllogism. Let the terms of presence be animal, man, wild, but of absence, animal, science, wild, the middle of both, wild. Example 4. Something wild is an animal. Nothing wild is a man. Every man is an animal. Something wild is an animal. Nothing wild is science. No science is an animal. Nor will there be a syllogism when both are negative, the one universal, the other particular. Let the terms of absence when the minor is universal as to the middle be animal, science, wild. Of presence, animal, man, wild. Example 5. Something wild is not an animal. Nothing wild is science. No science is an animal. Something wild is not an animal. Nothing wild is a man. Every man is an animal. When, however, the major is universal, but the minor particular, let the terms of absence be "crow," "snow," "white." Example 6. Nothing white is a crow. Not everything white is snow. No snow is a crow. But of presence we cannot take the terms, if R is present with some S, and with some is not present, since if P is present with every R, but R with some S, P will also be present with some S, but it was supposed to be present with no S. Indeed, it may be proved from the indefinite. Neither if each extreme be present or not present with a certain middle, will there be a syllogism, or if one be present and the other not, or if one be with some individual and the other with not every, or indefinitely. But let the common terms of all be "animal," "man," "white," "animal," "inanimate," "white." Example 7. Something white is (is not) an animal. Something white is (is not) a man. Every man is an animal. Something white is (is not) an animal. Something white is (is not) inanimate. Nothing inanimate is an animal. Wherefore it is clear in this figure also, when there will and when there will not be a syllogism, and that when the terms are disposed, as we have stated, a syllogism of necessity subsists, and that there should be a syllogism, it is necessary that the terms should be thus. It is also clear that all syllogisms in this figure are imperfect, for they are all perfected by certain assumptions, and that an universal conclusion, either negative or affirmative, cannot be drawn from this figure. Chapter 7. Of the first three figures, and of the completion of incomplete syllogisms. In all the figures it appears that when a syllogism is not produced, both terms being affirmative or negative, and particular, nothing in short results of a necessary character. But if the one be affirmative and the other negative, the negative being universally taken, there is always a syllogism of the minor extreme with the major. For example, if A is present with every, or with some B, but B is present with no C, the propositions being converted, C must necessarily not be present with some A. So also in the other figures, for a syllogism is always produced by conversion. Again, it is clear that an indefinite taken for a particular affirmative will produce the same syllogism in all the figures. Moreover, it is evident that all incomplete syllogisms are completed by means of the first figure, for all of them are concluded either ostensively or per impossible, but in both ways the first figure is produced, being ostensively completed. The first figure is produced because all of them were concluded by conversion, but conversion produces the first figure. But if they are demonstrated per impossible, there will be still the first figure, because the false being assumed, a syllogism arises in the first figure. For example, in the last figure, if A and B are present with every C, it can be shown that A is present with some B, for if A is present with no B, but B is present with every C, A will be present with no C. But it was supposed that A was present with every C, and in like manner it will happen in other instances. It is also possible to reduce all syllogisms to universal syllogisms in the first figure. For those in the second, it is evident, are completed through these, yet not all in like manner, but the universal by conversion of the negative, and each of the particular by deduction per impossible. Now particular syllogisms in the first figure are completed through themselves, but may in the second figure be demonstrated by deduction to the impossible. For example, if A is present with every B, but B with a certain C, it can be shown that A will be present with a certain C, for if A is present with no C, but is present with every B, B will be present with no C, for we know this by the second figure. So also will the demonstration be in the case of a negative, for if A is present with no B, but B is present with a certain C, A will not be present with a certain C, since if A is present with every C, and with no B, B will be present with no C, and this was the middle figure. Wherefore, as all syllogisms in the middle figure are reduced to universal syllogisms in the first figure, but particular in the first are reduced to those in the middle figure, it is clear that particular will be reduced to universal syllogisms in the first figure. Those however in the third, when the terms are universal, are immediately completed through those syllogisms, but when particular terms are assumed, they are completed through particular syllogisms in the first figure. But these, i.e. particulars, have been reduced to those, i.e. universals, so that also particular syllogisms in the third figure are reducible to the same. Wherefore it is evident that all can be reduced to universal syllogisms in the first figure. And we have therefore shown how syllogisms de in esse and de non in esse subsist, both those which are of the same figure with reference to themselves, and those which are of different figures, also with reference to each other. Chapter 8. Of syllogisms derived from two necessary propositions. Since, however, to exist necessarily, and to exist contingently are different, for many things exist, but not from necessity, and others neither necessarily, nor in short exist, yet may happen to exist, it is evident that there will be a different syllogism from each of these, and from the terms not being alike, but one syllogism will consist of those which are necessary, another of absolute, and a third of contingent. In necessary syllogisms it will almost always be the same, as in the case of absolute subsistences, for the terms being similarly placed in both absolute existence and in existing, or not of necessity, there will and there will not be a syllogism, except that there will be a difference in necessary or non-necessary subsistence being added to the terms. For a negative is in like manner convertible, and we assign similarly to be in the whole of a thing, and to be predicated of every. In the rest then it will be shown by the same manner through conversion that the conclusion is necessary, as in the case of being present. But in the middle figure, when the universal is affirmative, and the particular negative, and again in the third figure, when the universal is affirmative, but the particular negative, the demonstration will not be in the like manner. but it is necessary that proposing something with which either extreme is not present, we make a syllogism of this, for in respect of these there will be a necessary conclusion. If on the other hand, in respect to the proposed term, there is a necessary conclusion, there will be also one, i.e. a necessary conclusion, of some individual of that term, for what is proposed is part of it, and each syllogism is formed under its own appropriate figure. Chapter 9. Of Syllogisms, whereof one proposition is necessary, and the other pure in the first figure. It sometimes happens also that when one proposition is necessary, a necessary syllogism arises, not however from either proposition indifferently, but from the one that contains the greater extreme. For example, if A is assumed to be necessarily present or not present with B, but B to be alone present with C, for the premises being thus assumed, A will necessarily be present or not with C. For since A is or is not necessarily present with every B, but C is something belonging to B, C will evidently of necessity be one of these, i.e. will or will not be A. If again A, B, the major, is not necessary, but B, C, the minor, is necessary, there will not be a necessary conclusion, for if there be, it will happen that A is necessarily present with a certain B, both by the first and the third figure, but this is false, for B may happen to be a thing of that kind, that A may not be present with any thing of it. Besides, it is evident from the terms that there will not be a necessary conclusion, as if A were motion, B animal, and C man, for man is necessarily an animal, but neither are animal nor man necessarily moved. So also if A, B is negative, for there is the same demonstration. In particular syllogisms, however, if the universal is necessary, the conclusion will also be necessary, but if the particular be, there will not be a necessary conclusion, neither if the universal premise be negative, nor affirmative. Let then, in the first place, the universal be necessary, and let A be necessarily present with every B, but B only be present with a certain C. It is necessary therefore that A should of necessity be present with a certain C, for C is under B, and A was of necessity present with every B. The same will occur if the syllogism be negative, for the demonstration will be the same. But if the particular be necessary, the conclusion will not be necessary, for nothing impossible results, as neither in universal syllogisms. A similar consequence will result also in negatives. Let the terms be motion, animal, white. Example 1. Every animal is moved. It is necessary that something white should be an animal. Therefore something white is moved. This is not necessary, for it might possibly not be moved. no animal is moved. It is necessary that something white should not be an animal. Therefore something white is not moved. This is not necessary because it may be moved. Chapter 10. Of the same in the second figure. In the second figure, if the negative premise be necessary, the conclusion will also be necessary, but if the affirmative be necessary, the conclusion will not be necessary. For first, let the negative be necessary, and let it not be possible for A to be in any B, but let it be present with C alone. As then a negative proposition may be converted, B cannot be present with any A, but A is with every C. Hence B cannot be present with any C, for C is under A. In like manner also, if the negative be added to C, for if A cannot be with any C, neither can C be present with any A, but A is with every B, so neither can C be present with any B, as the first figure will again be produced, wherefore neither can B be present with C, since it is similarly converted. If, however, the affirmative premise be necessary, the conclusion will not be necessary, for let A necessarily be present with every B, and alone not be present with any C. Then the negative being converted, we have the first figure, but it was shown in the first, that when the major negative proposition is not necessary, neither will the conclusion be necessary, so that neither in these will there be a necessary conclusion. Once more, if the conclusion is necessary, it results that C is not necessarily present with a certain A, for if B is necessarily present with no C, neither will C be necessarily present with any B, but B is present necessarily with a certain A. If A is necessarily present with every B, hence it is necessary that C should not be present with a certain A. There is, however, nothing to prevent such an A being assumed with which universally C may be present. Moreover, it can be shown by exposition of the terms that the conclusion is not simply necessary, but necessary from the assumption of these, e.g. let A be animal, B man, C white, and let the propositions be similarly assumed, for it is possible for an animal to be with nothing white, then neither will man be present with anything white, yet not from necessity, for it may happen for man to be white, yet not so long as animal is present with nothing white, so that from these assumptions there will be a necessary conclusion, but not simply necessary. The same will happen in particular syllogisms, for when the negative proposition is universal and necessary, the conclusion also will be necessary, but when the affirmative is universal and necessary, and the negative particular, the conclusion will not be necessary. First, then, let there be an universal and necessary negative, and let A not possibly be present with any B, but with a certain C. Since therefore a negative proposition is convertible, B can neither be possibly present with any A, but A is with a certain C, so that of necessity B is not present with a certain C. Again, let there be an universal and necessary affirmative, and let the affirmative be attached to B. If then A is necessarily present with every B, but is not with a certain C, B is not with a certain C, it is clear, yet not from necessity, since there will be the same terms for the demonstration, as were taken in the case of universal syllogisms. Neither, moreover, will the conclusion be necessary, if a particular necessary negative be taken as the demonstration is through the same terms. End of chapter 10 of book 1. Recording in memory of Mitchell Edwards.